Dragon Ball Advance Adventure is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that closely follows the story of the original series and portrays Goku's journey to collect all of the Dragon Balls and summon the eternal dragon Shenron. Just like the source material, you'll be meeting a huge cast of characters who are all well presented and serve to flesh out the world around you as you make your way through the several levels that make up the experience. On the gameplay front, it's divided into two parts. The side-scrolling levels make up the bulk of what the game has to offer, but it also throws in one-on-one battles that closely resemble the 2D fighting games from the series past. Each level looks like it came straight out of the anime, whether you're whacking the Red Ribbon Army soldiers with your trusty rod or shooting Kamehamehas to clear the battlefield. It's basically a button basher that doesn't involve that much skill, but rather relies on quick reflexes to get out of any tight situations you'll find yourself in. And where the game comes into its own is within the 2D fighting sections that require a lot more from the player, with them resembling a standard fighting game setup that utilizes button presses combined with D-pad movements to pull off your moves. It's not deep by any means, but it's great fun to stun your opponent before shooting them up into the air, only to follow them up and forcefully bring them back down to earth. After you've completed the game, you get the option to play through it again with different characters, or take on a new tournament mode that's essentially a small take on the popular Budokai games, where you're free to choose from many different characters and battle it out. All in all, Advance Adventure is a solid side-scroller, and even though its short runtime might be a bit disappointing, there's several reasons to jump back in more than make up for it. Black Belt Challenge is a fighting game that never reached the same notoriety of the likes of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat on the GBA, and it's a shame as it's by far one of the most impressive games on the handheld. As with most fighters, you're presented with a selection of characters to battle it out with, who all share a string of basic moves such as kicks, punches and throws, as well as several special moves that each of them can call their own. The gameplay is very much what you'd expect, with the standard fighting setup being deployed, with either a low or high attack being assigned to each button, and having to link them together to perform combos, becoming your main means of laying out high amounts of damage. Now, if you ever want to sell a lot of fighting games, it's important to have plenty of modes. Regular arcade fighting can get pretty boring after a while, so to increase the replay value, the developers also included Versus, Survival, Challenge and Training. Most of these should sound familiar to players, but Challenge is the one that stands out most in the crowd. In Challenge, you're tasked to do specific things in a fight, such as finishing your opponent with a special attack, or defeating two enemies with only one health bar, for example. The challenges get progressively harder, but the reward itself also gets better. This comes in the form of gold, which can be used to unlock a wide range of collectibles such as artwork and even extra fighters that can be used throughout the different modes. Now, one aspect that'll instantly impress are the visuals. The sprites are huge and extremely well detailed, and the same can be said for the backgrounds that aren't static and are filled with little touches to help bring life to each stage you fight on. Unfortunately, these days the game is quite expensive to buy, but if you're looking to fill up your emulator with some new fighting games, then Black Belt Challenge is definitely a game to consider. The Game Boy Advance had its fair share of quirky games, with the likes of Rhythm Tengoku, but one of the strangest has to be WarioWare Twisted. It's basically a collection of minigames that utilize a motion sensor built into the game's cartridge that opened up many new possibilities for gameplay. The game follows the same structure as the first game in the series and requires the player to beat story mode stages in order to unlock new ones, and then go back and earn high scores on each minigame to be rewarded with hidden extras. But what makes the gameplay so compelling is the sheer range of the activities you'll be undertaking, from making pizzas to navigating mazes, cracking safes, and even short platforming sections that serve to keep the player on their toes, as each only last for a short amount of time. All of them make use of the motion sensing technology in interesting ways, like shaking or slowly moving the console in a specific way with great accuracy, to the point that failure at any given task is often caused by being impatient or not understanding just how sensitive the input method is. Now, for me, what really blew me away with WarioWare Twisted is the sheer variety when it comes to the game's visuals. Imaginative would be the best way to sum it up, as most of the minigames are incredibly basic in their appearance, but it's the little details and touches that add a lot of life to every action you'll see on screen. Apart from its creative looks, WarioWare Twisted excels when it comes to replay value, by offering an incredible amount of collectibles to acquire throughout the game, as well as several hidden minigames that prolong the life of the experience well after the credits have rolled. Overall, it's easy to say that WarioWare Twisted is one of the best games on the Game Boy Advance, so if you're looking for something that's quick and easy to play in short bursts whilst on the go, then this is it. Medabots is an RPG which is very similar to the likes of Pokemon, but instead of capturing elemental monsters, it's all based around customizable robots. It loosely follows the TV show of the same name and centers around a young boy known as Iki, who longs to be able to wield his own Medabot and participate in battles with like-minded collectors. In order to gain a fully functional Medabot, he needs a skeletal frame, 4 Medaparts for the frame's head, arms and legs, and finally a medal which gives life to the machine. You're allowed to keep 9 of these Medabots in your party, and the sheer amount of customization options and collectible parts is easily the biggest draw in the game. Once you've got your team up and running, it's time to take on some battles, and this is where Medabots truly comes into its own. Each encounter is a turn-based affair with a battlefield consisting of several standby spots for each contender and a central stage where you send your robots to clash with the enemy. There's a lot of factors that influence each fight, with the most important being the kind of medal and Medaparts that you equip on your robots, since they will be vital in deciding the many aspects of their performance. As you progress in the game, your knowledge of each part's pros and cons will naturally increase, allowing you to easily come up with strategies when equipping your robot's parts that perfectly counteract the opposition. Now, when the game isn't busy throwing what seems like an endless stream of battles your way, there's a fair share of exploration to be done as well. Here you'll uncover several secret items and have the chance to take on several side quests, where you can work towards unlocking some of the more powerful and rare parts for your robots that'll make battles all the more manageable. If you're on the lookout for a new RPG to jump into on the Game Boy Advance and have all but exhausted the usual suggestions on the system, then Medabots is well worth giving a go. The Game Boy Advance had no shortage of solid platformers, with Mega Man and Mario receiving many entries on the system, but as with most consoles, many good games fly under the radar, and Dinotopia is one of them. It's all based on a book, and follows a young man known as Clayton as he sets out to stop a gang of pirates who have begun to steal the eggs of dinosaurs, in the hopes of using them to locate treasure. Now, the story is easily the least enjoyable aspect of the game, but the gameplay that Dinotopia brings to the table far outweighs any issues with its narrative. With it being a platformer, you'll know exactly what to expect when jumping in, with the game presenting a generous amount of levels to make your way through, where you're met with many different threats to overcome. Luckily, Clayton has got many options when it comes to doing so, with his staff being the main way to counteract enemy attacks, and eventually you'll be able to upgrade this weapon and not have to solely rely on melee attacks, with magic also playing a role, and being able to shoot projectiles, allowing you a bit more breathing room when it comes to encountering enemies. The main objective of the game is to secure the eggs the pirates are hunting down, and this usually culminates in a boss fight, which are no doubt the most enjoyable parts of the game. And after they've fallen, you can gather the eggs and return them to the nesting area, where a new level will then open up for you to explore. A nice twist in the gameplay sees it switching to a side-scrolling shooter for some levels, as well as several underwater sections that add a bit of variety to the game, and offer a nice distraction from the usual platforming moments. Overall, if you can find it for a good price, Dinotopia is well worth giving a go for yourself. Gradius has long been one of the staples of the shooter genre, and Galaxies on the Game Boy Advance would carry on this tradition with one of the greatest entries in the franchise's history. This wasn't some scaled-back port, but instead the full-on experience fans of the games have come to know and love, which once again sees you jumping into a ship and tackling an ever-increasing amount of enemies as you make your way through each level. You've got many ways to deal with these targets, which is mainly through your standard laser and missiles that pack a real punch, but it's the power-up system you'll likely find yourself falling back on, and just like the rest of the games in the series, it's presented in exactly the same way. For those who don't know how the Gradius power-up system works, there is a slider at the bottom, and when you pick up a power-up, it moves the slider over one space, and then you can press the power-up button to use whatever you have selected. For newcomers, there is an automatic option, but I feel the classic option is far better for those looking for a bit more of a challenge. Speaking of difficulty, this is where the boss fights come in, and they are by far some of the best you'll see in the series. They'll not only test your patience, but also your complete understanding of all the options you have at your fingertips, and thanks to a handy continue feature, you'll be able to pick up exactly where you left off. Gradius Galaxies is by far one of the more competent shooters on the Game Boy Advance. It brings together many things that fans will know and love. It's got the same power-ups, design elements and level themes that make the series what it is, so if you're like me and enjoy the franchise, this is one game you do not want to miss. Shining Soul 2 takes all of the aspects of the first game and improves upon the many systems that comprised it in meaningful ways. It's basically an action RPG where you can choose from one of many different classes for your character to specialize in, such as archery, stealth, or a well-balanced all-rounder, as you set out to free the land from an evil force hell-bent on its destruction. For sure, the plot is nothing other than generic, but for what it lacks in narrative, it more than makes up for in gameplay. The game consists of several dungeons to navigate, each populated with a surprising amount of different enemy types that are either weak or resistant to your attacks. As with many RPGs, you'll find yourself leveling up over the course of the game and increasing your stats like vitality and strength, as well as acquiring new skills that help keep the hordes of enemies at bay. To complement this progression system is the use of items, which are littered throughout the environment and serve to increase your chances of survival. From swords to different sets of armor and even magic, there's plenty to find, and more importantly, many ways to use them to your advantage. For example, you can add elemental magic to your normal attacks, which really comes in handy when you're up against enemies who might have a weakness to a specific type, may that be fire, water, or lightning. Getting to grips with the item system can seem daunting at first, due to the sheer quantity you'll find throughout the game, but it soon becomes one of the most addictive qualities of the experience, allowing you to augment your character to suit your specific style of play perfectly. When it comes down to it, Shining Soul 2 is a solid title, with some minor flaws when it comes to its story and soundtrack, but for action RPG fans, you'll find it to be a great little distraction that's extremely hard to put down once you've gotten into it. If there was one game on the Game Boy Advance that never got the recognition it deserved, it would have to be Car Battler Joe. Much like the name implies, it's essentially a car combat RPG that puts you into the role of Joe, a teenager who lives in a world full of people with a passion for blowing things up. As you would expect, Joe wants to become a car battler himself, and the game follows his journey from a low-key contender to one of the most feared drivers in the land. What really sets this game apart from similar experiences is the variety of playstyles that comprise it. Its gameplay is divided into three parts: the RPG aspect, where you visit various towns and interact with NPCs, the crafting, where you tinker with your vehicles and gather materials to help build villages, and the main course, which is where you hop into your car for some Mode 7 enhanced battles. When it comes to gameplay, the car itself is easy to control thanks to a simple 2-button setup that sees the A button handling acceleration and B is used for your weapons. Depicted on the screen are two gauges, with one handling your health and the other SP. Now SP is used to execute special maneuvers known as overdrives that include jumping, turbo boosting, or putting up a shield, and using these at the right moment is essential to getting through each battle. And in conjunction with the many customizable aspects of your car, such as armor and weapons, you're more than equipped to deal with each enemy out on the road. The level of customization is what really helps Car Battler Joe succeed, and provides nigh on endless ways to engage with each mission. To top it off, once you've completed the game, there's still more to do and see, with several new areas that open up to you, providing even more content to enjoy. Car Battler Joe is many interesting things at once, and proves to be more fun and accessible than its obscure nature suggests. Fire Emblem has long been considered one of the best options when it comes to tactical RPGs, and the Sacred Stones on the Game Boy Advance is no exception. It follows the usual formula that sees several factions throughout the world at war with each other, and an ancient evil that threatens to engulf the entire kingdom. For anyone familiar with the series, the gameplay picks up where the previous games left off, and focuses on huge grid-based battles and character progression that is central to the overall experience. All of the old classes return, such as archers, cavaliers, and swordmasters, but a handful of new ones have been added into the mix, like summoners and mage knights, that further enhance the overall strategy involved in the game. Perhaps the biggest change that Sacred Stones brings to the table though is the all-new promotion system that adds a lot more freedom when it comes to choosing your character's class, and allows you to get far more creative than previous entries. Of course, battles are still the main highlight of the game, and everything has remained untouched in this area. Every weapon has a strength and a weakness, making it essential to choose who attacks who, and where to place each unit. Swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. The same applies for the different types of magic, and as a result you can't simply breeze your way through these encounters, and instead have to assess each situation as it presents itself, and counteract with a sound strategy. If you're a Fire Emblem fan, you've probably already got this one, but for those of you who are fond of the genre and never got round to it back in the day, it's still by far one of the best strategy games you'll find on the handheld. Resurrection of the Dark Dragon is a remake of the first Shining Force game that hit the Genesis way back in 1993. It's a tactical RPG in which you lead a group of adventurers against the armies of an evil neighbouring country, with the journey seeing you visiting a whole host of locales and interacting with many NPCs that help build the narrative and believability of the events that transpire. It all centres around Max, a young swordsman that's lost his memories, and even though it may seem a bit cliche, Dark Dragon has got plenty of tricks up its sleeve that managed to save it from becoming yet another run-of-the-mill RPG. The main way it does this is during battle, which all plays out in a turn-based manner and allows you to use up to 12 characters to counteract the enemy's advances. Every time two characters attack each other, a close-up animation is seen in which the attacker lashes out at his target, after which a second strike or a counter-attack may follow. These animations add a lot of personality to allies and enemies alike, with plenty of impressive effects and sprites that bring life to each and every move you make on the battlefield. Characters gain experience from every attack and every defeat they carry out, with new abilities and skills being unlocked the further you progress, and with just over 30 characters who can join your ranks, there's plenty to discover. Now, compared to some other tactical RPGs on the Game Boy Advance, Shining Force has rather simple battle mechanics, but it executes them with style, to the point of it never becoming tiresome, as the game is constantly drip feeding you new ways to deal with each and every threat you find yourself faced with. Resurrection of the Dark Dragon is a worthy remake of Shining Force, preserving the original game as much as possible, but also tackling most of its flaws. It's just a shame that this incredible reimagining is still stuck on the GBA to this day. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 3, as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos, which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below, to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.